What was your frick it, I'm done moment? I put in my 2-week notice at work to pursue a better opportunity. Things had been nothing but positive at that job, but it was time to move on. The next day at work, I get a meeting invite for what I expected to be an exit interview. I walk in, and HR and the corporate lawyer are there. The lawyer demands to know where I'm going to work, and starts shouting threats to ruin me with legal action for violating the non-compete agreement. I wasn't. At that point, frick a smooth transition. I spent the next 2 weeks taking 3-hour lunches, chatting with friends in the halls and doing zero work. I had an ex-employer try to pull this on me, son the lawyer. When I refused to tell them, they asked me how they were supposed to know whether or not I was going to work for a competitor. I politely explained that it wasn't my job to ensure they did their own due diligence. Started coming in 2-3 hours early for the extra work that I was given. Hours were 10:06. I got a written warning for leaving when the bell rung at the end of the day because my manager didn't come in until 10 and assumed I wasn't putting in the extra effort. If you come into work early, no one ever notices. If you leave early, everyone thinks you're a slacker. Oh no. Worked at a grocery store in a small town after leaving my ex and moving states. Within a month, I got called into the manager's office and was scolded for stealing money from the register, even though I knew I hadn't done it. 2 weeks later, got called back in and got a second warning for stealing from the register. I talked to my supervisor and she started looking through receipts, etc. and found that my drawer was completely balanced, maybe short or over by a few pennies here and there. Meanwhile, you could charge things to be taken out of your paycheck and I had done it once with a pack of cigarettes. Now, I only smoke menthol and when I started looking through the tickets, I was finding cartons that had been charged that definitely didn't belong to me. Sup got to digging more and found charges had been made on all employee accounts, some as much as several $100s that had been taken out of their checks weekly. Manager caught wind of it and fired her immediately. I was brought in once again and couldn't hold my temper, so I told the manager that I knew she was stealing and blaming it on everyone else. She fired me on the spot for harassing her and told me to pick up my paycheck at the end of the week. Went to pick up my check and the C manager had forged my signature, cashed my check in the store and took around $250 out, leaving me with $57. I called every number you could think of about it and that store was shut down less than a month later. I was rushed into emergency surgery when it was discovered I had an ectopic pregnancy. I called my boss right before, told him what was happening, and he asked if it could wait for my day off. I just handed the phone to my fiance and was rolled away. The next day I left the hospital and called work again for the HR number so I could start my leave paperwork. I said, "Hi John, it's Smidgen," and he said, "You know you're 15 minutes late, right? Yeep, fuck thisville." What the frick? Worked for a snack food company in Colorado. On my last employee review, received great accolades from the owner and he stated that since I was the only buyer and the company was growing they would hire someone to help and I would be the manager. 6 months later the owner pulled me aside on a Wednesday and told me they hired someone that was starting on Monday and that I would be reporting to that person. I gave my notice on the spot. Later, I looked at that person's LinkedIn and she had 1 year, 4 months experience. I have 20 plus. First job in high school I booked a short holiday away, spoke to manager in work and she told me I could not have it off under no reason as the only person who could cover was also on holiday in another country. They walked into the store the next day, spoke to them and they said yeah they could cover easily. Went back to manager and she still flat out told me no, so went frick it, I'm done. Handed in my notice and went on that holiday. Don't bulls your staff. Sorry can't take you to her because I have bad hair, was all I needed to hear to understand that person is a piece of crap and need not have anything to do with her. I was a broke college student and working part-time as a night janitor and full-time as a research assistant before having to go back to school in the spring. I needed the money to pay for tuition. After my first lease expired, I tried contacting a few places for a summer sublet, but no one got back to me in time and I had to live a few days in my car. But within a few days of me moving out, the app owners sent me their responses. At that point, I had already developed a system and was quite used to being homeless. So that entire summer, I just said frick it, I'm done, and lived out of my car. I would shower once every 2 days at the university's lab shower and sleep in the unrestricted night parking spots. I did this for a couple weeks in college between the time the dorms closed and our new lease began. My soon-to-be roommates, who were also in the same situation, referred to it as our fraternity called No Homeger, which we felt was more palatable than calling ourselves homeless, which we were. My boss waited until the week before a proposal was due to start on it. She had received it 2 months prior, and at that point I offered to help and received no response from her. Then, the week before the due date, she comes to me in a panic asking for my help. This was the 3rd time she had done this crap to me. I forward her all of my research and files and stay late every night helping to put it together, reviewing the final draft of said proposal. My research is 80% of the content and I am not listed on the team. Frick it, I'm done. Accepted another job offer 2 days later. Haven't looked back since. In situations like these, I really wish it was acceptable to just walk in a meeting and yell out, "This was all my work. I can show you emails and everything. This B right here is taking all the credit. Here's my 2 weeks. Hope she learns how to do her job." Best friend of mine of 16-17 years just got married. I was his best man. Was in desperate need of a job. I knew my work was looking for someone and the pay was double what he was making, so I informed him, gave him my boss's number, email address, and hand delivered an app to his apartment for him to fill out. Also offered to pick him up and drive him to my company office. Even gave my boss his number, which he called 4 times. Never filled out the app, call in, emailed, or answer my boss's phone calls. We passed up a few other well-qualified people just so he can at least get an interview. They were going to give him the job on the spot. Got a call from him yelling at me for not following up for him and getting back to him about the job. His wife called me asking me why I didn't refer him to my boss, and at that point I got rid of his number and haven't spoken to him since. You can lead a horse to water, but can't make it drink. Man, I'd give anything for a hookup like that. I gave up on my decade-long career as a civil structural engineer about 6 months ago. It had been a long time coming, as my interest in the work itself had dwindled over the 10 years I'd been doing it. But my last job was particularly bad. Chronically understaffed, 60+ hour weeks, required to work weekends, and an owner who was a monstrous butthole. The last straw was when in an all-staff meeting he told me, "You're the consultant. Do your freaking job." I'd only been there for 3 months at that point and was still familiarizing myself with port marine engineering, as that wasn't what I'd done at my previous job. I don't even remember anything else that happened at that meeting. All I could think of was that I needed to talk to my wife about how I was going to be unemployed for a while. That night when I told her, she said, "If you're still there at 3 PM tomorrow, I'm going to be very upset." I quit the next day. At work they hired someone for me to report to, even though I'd be doing the job for 6 months or so. I trained the guy to the point where he let me do my own thing, which was good, but I was seriously underpaid. They promised a promotion along with a hefty raise if I hit certain metrics, which I did, along with doing my boss's job while he didn't bother showing up. 35 sick days in 2015. 21 so far this year. I was more patient than I feel most would be. I finally got my big promotion where they had me continue to report to the guy who never showed up. Changed my job title and gave me the huge lump sum of $5,000, which was less than 10% of my salary. Industry average for the position I'm in is 15-20k more than what they moved me to, and I knew that for a fact and showed them those facts. I told my director I wouldn't be able to live with that number. He told me that was the number and I had my "frick it, I'm done" moment. 1 phone call. 2 meetings later I had an offer for substantially above market value, and tomorrow is my last day. Probably the most satisfying part of the whole process was when I told my director and VP I had the offer in hand and they tried to negotiate with me to stay. You guys had an opportunity to negotiate when I first brought this forward. I don't see a reason for me to give you another chance here. Thank you for the experience I've gained while working for you. My last day will be the 3rd of June. I was dating a girl whose father was dying of cancer and was at home in hospice care. I found out that she was stealing his morphine to get high. That's when I said, "You know, this probably isn't the type of person I want to be with." Good for you for realizing it. When I was 16 I had my first job at a chain restaurant. Manager was a lesbian and she invited me on a date. Told her that I wasn't interested, and she proceeded to make work heck for me. I had vacation approved and planned for a while. Hotel was paid for, and the day before I was supposed to leave she tells me she changed the schedule and put me on a double in the middle of the week. I will also be fired if I take my vacation. Frick it, I'm done. Just the other day actually, kicked my now ex-girlfriend out with nowhere to go. Why so cruel? Well, amongst constantly being treated like crap, ignored, taken advantage of, and just a constant feeling of walking on nails with her, I put up with it, bit my tongue, and pushed it to the back of my mind. She got pregnant, and red flags started to go up. Close call miscarriages, a suspected ectopic pregnancy, wouldn't quit smoking, wouldn't go to a prenatal appointment. I was on the fence about it all because, well, I wanted to be a dad. Then I go out to her car to get her something, lift up a hoodie in the back seat, and lo and behold, there's a box of tampons. Normally, that wouldn't mean anything, but in this case it did, as I had cleaned her car out and detailed it inside and out only a few weeks prior, and this box of tampons was not there before. She doesn't hang out with other girls, as she hates other girls really. She had lied to me about being pregnant, as well as lied to my family and gotten their hopes up. So that was the final straw. I had decided then and there to rid my life of this lying and manipulative leech. So I go inside, and the first thing out of her mouth was, I'm going to Virginia Beach at the end of the month with another guy. It's gonna be fun. Wait, hold on, rewind that. Another guy? Frick no. No, asking me if I want to go, as a courtesy to, you know, your boyfriend that you are having a child with, so she left to hang out with someone, and in the meantime, I threw all her crap in the driveway, texted her and told her to get her crap and stay the frick away from my house and my family. If that isn't a frick it, I'm done moment. I don't know what is. A huge flag is a girl that hates other girls. Girls usually can sniff out BS faster. Most recently, when one girl and I did 90% of a 45-page report which was supposed to be done by our group of 6, we ended up saying frick it, breaking off and submitting our own report instead. I worked at a crappy call center but was the best employee, like I showed up to work and always hit my freaking metrics. The job was only worth it because I always made the bonuses, weekly death threats. Then I heard the rumor that they would be slashing bonuses when the company failed a sales project. I thought I would be above it because I was always number 1 on the metrics sheet. Then my boss told me that I missed a script line and that voided my bonus. I walked out the next day. When the man I had loved for years told me we were on hold, he informed me of the exact evening he was going on a date with some new girl and that he'd let me know by the end of the week if we were back on. Amusingly, he got offended when I told him I felt disrespected. The idea of a healthy adult relationship with this man is futile. Feels so good to be done with him. When my old boss told me OSHA was a scam and we didn't need to pay for anything those lawyers said, I was out of their next payday. Wanted to make plans with my at the time best friend. His response was, if nobody else wants to do anything that night, I guess we can, was the final straw that made me just say frick it and stop the friendship. Been 4 or 5 years since that happened. Don't regret it one bit. Girlfriend cheated. Told her I need space to think. Friend texts me a few days later to find out what happened. Get really into the details with my friend about my relationship with her. He keeps making weird excuses that justify her behavior, like maybe she's scared of how she feels about you and that's why she cheated. I end up super p. Stop talking to him. Text him the next day to say frick off. Turns out he didn't have his phone that night. My ex invited him to a party, stole his phone, locked herself in the bathroom and impersonated my friend to try and convince me to take her back. Nope. I used to work in an IT support call center and had the Doucheast middle manager, like Lumberg but worse. The company had started getting stingy on warranties, not honoring the labor component, so we had to walk customers through replacing computer parts like motherboards over the phone. He started to tell us we're spending too much time in calls. Ugh. One day there was a big queue and he sent a typical Douche email to all call center staff saying there's a queue. Come on guys, get rid of it. Frick it, I'm done with this. I just took all the calls and hung up on all them, flushing all 40 people from the queue in about a minute. I replied to all and said the queue is gone. Escorted from the premises 5 minutes later. No regrets, not even an exit interview. Success. You followed orders. Manager should have been more specific. I think you have upper management written all over you. I was about 16 or 17 at my first decent part-time job. It was a small franchise chain store in my hometown. I'd been there for about a year, which made me, laughably, one of the more senior part-timers on staff. Over a long holiday weekend, I was working, alone, for a full day shift. I had a list of tasks to complete, several of which I'd done before, which my supervisor figured would take me all day. I was being paid time and a half since it was a holiday, and the store's owners were very conscious of this. I managed to get everything done by midday, and proceeded to do more busy work. Stacking, folding, taking out garbage, inventory, labeling, everything I could imagine would be useful. My next shift was the following weekend. When I arrived, the owners asked to speak with me in the office. I came in, and one of the owners asked me to sit. He was a very short, fat, Italian chap who had a reputation for power trips. The chair was on its lowest seating position. I was berated for being lazy on my last shift. Apparently one of the other supervisors caught me reading papers, my list of tasks, and standing around, labeling, or simply sweeping, cleaning, instead of doing any real work. The owner railed on me, telling me this was unacceptable. His speech ended with a typical "this is not the kind of attitude you should have if you want to keep working here." Frick this, I thought. Then it came to me in a flash. The words I'd wanted to utter throughout his tirade. And so I said it. Well, I don't anymore. The owner's eyes bugged out. He ordered me to repeat myself. I did, and said I'd have my 2 weeks notice in by the end of my shift. He told me to leave. Now, I got up, stood in front of him and smiled, handed him my passkey, and strolled out to the parking lot. The drive home that day was one of the sweetest feelings I've ever experienced in my entire life. I'd been there for about a year, which made me, laughably, one of the more senior part-timers on staff. Huge red flag right there. I found myself cleaning toilets in a McDonald's at 3 AM. I was only 18 but already graduated and really woke up to the fact that I had no plan at all. Moving into my senior year, and I'm graduating early. I have no idea what I'm going to do after. I used to work in pizza delivery. I worked for a while for this sleazeball owner who regularly bent and broke the rules to benefit himself. When Pepsi products went on sale at our local grocery store for cheaper than our distributor sold them for, he would tell his manager to load up his truck with as much Pepsi and Mountain Dew she could buy. He also would have me take deliveries well outside our delivery area by ringing them up as pickups and writing down the address. Anyway, I was often the only driver scheduled in the morning. Usually wasn't a problem, but one day it became a huge issue. My boss first had me take a delivery a good 15-20 miles outside our delivery area. We got slammed right after I left. Rather than call another driver in, he let the deliveries wait and got pissed off at me for taking around an hour on the out of area delivery. I said whatever and loaded up my car with 5 deliveries that happened to be dotted all across our coverage area. The last guy was pissed all heck at us for taking so long, cussed me out, shorted me $10, and slammed the door in my face. When I got back, my boss starts cussing me out about taking so long that day. I guess the customer who was called the store to complain that I asked him not to speak to me like that while he was cussing me out. Got a customer is always right, work harder speech. I went outside, took the sign off my car and left. I ended up calling our corporate office on him the next day. To make things even better, when I went in to pick up my last check, he threatened to jump across the counter to fight me and started calling me a P when I wouldn't agree to a fight. He often carried a gun on him. Wasn't about to get shot over a pizza job. Also found out that he ended up fricking up my taxes hard that year when he and many others in the upper management of that chain got busted for tax fraud. TLDR. Old pizza boss cussed me out over his incompetence. Tried fighting me after I quit. I used to work in pizza delivery. Say no more. I had been on active duty in the army for 21 years and thought I'd stay for 23. My previous 4 years had been on recruiting duty, which was a nice change of pace. The army then decided to send me to Fort Drum, NY. My family and I arrived at Drum in mid-October and there was about 2 feet of snow on the ground. That's pretty normal for that area. As the next few months progressed, I got used to shoveling pretty hefty overnight snowfalls in order to get to work the next day. It was not a big deal. One day in particular though, a blast of Arctic air descended on the region and sent temperatures down to -22°F. We got an early morning phone call from our leadership saying to report to physical fitness training as normal. So, we went out that morning with snow everywhere and a wind chill of -44°F and ran for 4 miles. I told my supervisor that I'm retiring in the next 6 months and would fill out the paperwork over the weekend. He laughed at me and didn't take it serious. That packet was completely filled out and on his desk at 0530 that Monday. Frick it, I'm done. Worked at my job for 5 years while in school. I worked there full time while attending classes. To make things look good on a resume, I worked extremely hard and showed interest to my boss about moving up into management. This is retail. After this, it was a 1.5 year runaround of hiring people in the spot I was gunning for that my boss thought was better. Despite me doing everything and anything for her on the job, I would cover shifts, stay late, finish big projects, and work all holidays. Instead, what does she do? She hires the open management spot to someone who quit a few months prior for a better job. That person was also fired 4 months after taking the job I wanted for constantly showing up late to open the store on time. After she was fired, I was sure I would finally get my opportunity. My boss promised me we'd talk about it if a spot came open. I show up to work, only to be met by my new manager. My boss didn't bother to talk to me about it one bit. This was my frick it, I'm done. That afternoon, I put in my resume at my now job. A friend of mine got me on with his IT company and I didn't look back. I've now been there 2 years, making twice the money, and I'm working on my masters. Life is good. XGF and I were on a break. Ended up at the same bar and I ended up giving her a lift home. I didn't want to come inside and she wouldn't take no for an answer. She refused to get out of my car for like an hour, screaming at me all the while, and only got out because she was going to pee herself. And, like, she did pee herself in the street a few minutes later. Freaking crazy. Safe to say we didn't get back together. At least she didn't pee in your car. 20 minutes into selling Kirby vacuums. First, they said customer support. Then they said product demonstration. Finally they said knock on people's doors and sell them vacuums. Nope. When I realized that it was possible for my boss to be even more of a douchebag, and I had an emergency illness and was hospitalized for a week. We did not have official sick leave, so I was told that I had to use 1 week vacation, even though sick days were paid if you took a 1 or 2 sick days at a time. Douche grade B. And I was on IV Dilaudid, synthetic H. My boss brought in a laptop. The hospital had Wi-Fi and told me to get work done during my stay. I'm a controller, accountant. Trying to run numbers while hopped up is impossible. Douche grade A. And later that same year, I put in for vacation. We earn 2 weeks every year. Plus I had carryover vacation from the prior year. My boss, the owner Prees, tried to say that I couldn't take vacation again for a year. He felt it was fair for me to lose my unused vacation, since I hadn't scheduled my illness. It took the other officers in the company to talk him down. Douche grade A+. All that would be illegal where I'm from. So I played D&D in college. There was this one guy, ugh. Everyone knows that one guy who forgets that people play games to have fun. But in any case, he wanted to DM, and we wanted to play an epic game. So we started at level 25. We built our characters and the very first encounter the DM threw against us was specifically crafted to be all but immune to our characters. Like, seriously, the most effective move any of us had was to turn into a giant red dragon and sit on one them. Okay, technically grappling, but still. So after a grueling and unfun hour of trying to do anything against these monstrosities, my character unfurled his magical wings and flew home. And I packed up my stuff and just left. Apparently me leaving opened the floodgates, because shortly after I left, everyone else was like frick it, this isn't fun, we're done here. Dude never got to DM again. I had a DM who had the it's the DM versus the player's mindset as well. It's never fun that way. He actually thought it was his job to kill us. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.